Now, this proposal is to create an entity. But if you had to see the draft Consensus Kingdom law, the kind of powers that that entity would be given based on the law, if that law passes the way it stands right now, there is hardly any place for a government administration. And the government, the ones that are supposed to be able to make political decisions, much too much is being put in this, at least proposed to put in the hands of this entity. And the entity, and I think this is for me where the crux of it would be, the entity does not have any account to give to the authorities of St. Martin. The only account they really have to give is to the state secretary, so to the Dutch government, but via the state secretary. And you cannot have any entity, regardless to what name you give it, with that kind of power. I mean, the proposal is that the entity decides what projects to be carried out. Whether they should participate in a government-owned company, so buy shares, give subsidies to business and persons on St. Martin, etc. Mind you, Oral, there are several good aspects of the plans, of the so-called reform plans that I believe are necessary, but to put it all in the hand of this entity that does not have to give political accountability, I think that is a serious infringement on our democratic system. Many persons talk about, yeah, but our autonomy, and I don't even look at it so much as the autonomy of St. Martin. I look at it as we are part of a democratic system. Whether we like it, whether it functions ideally or not, fact is you have a parliament elected by the people, and a majority of that parliament is responsible for putting ministers in place to run this country. And when you're going to have a lot of the running of the country, the planning, the execution, the evaluation, the monitoring, etc., the financing is going to be put in another entity, and that entity does not have political responsibility. I think it's an infringement on the democratic system of the country.
Could it be that the Dutch government is saying, look, St. Martin, since 10, seen countless governments. And at the same time, the former Netherlands Antilles, namely Curacao, we can see the failure of the banking system. So there are a number of proposals, like you mentioned, that is good in this entity. But I think what the Dutch is saying, look, we're tired of these islands coming back to us all the time with a handout, and we want to make sure structurally that we just correct that.
Yeah, but you know, Oral, not in the way that they are proposing it. And I say this because the view behind this entity, at least the way it is put on paper, is that this entity could come in. There is a reform program also for St. Martin. They have a reform program for Aruba. They have one for Curacao and one for St. Martin. And they expect that once this entity is put in place, mind you, the entity can get employees, the entity, basically have a carte blanche. And within the short period of time, is going to be able to reform our social security, our education, our government finances. That is idealistic.
So then the ministers can go home then?
I said that in different words on a program I was on yesterday. I said it is very, very far-reaching. The authorities and powers that are proposed for this entity without having to give account to, for example, the parliament. Even the parliament then would be sitting and looking at this entity operating and bringing out reports to the Dutch government and the state secretary. Yeah, in the current form, I think it's much too ambitious in terms of carrying out some of the necessary reforms that need to be carried out in terms of how quickly it is felt that it's like, send a plane load of persons down there and they're gonna get it fixed.